Hi, it's me, Christine. This is episode 7 of my podcast, Unmuzzled at 67.
Just do that wee bit again.
Yeah, sure.
Ready when you are.
Hi, it's me, Christine. This is episode 7 of my podcast, Unmuzzled at 67. And we're picking up today on the second part of the time I spent living in Jersey. So this is kind of what I would call Jersey 2. If you remember in the last time we were talking about me moving from Glasgow to Jersey and finding a new job and finding the gay scene, which, you know, was very much part of what was going on in my life socially at that time. And just how I kind of settled in. I was really having a ball, was having a nice job with a nice boss, and I really was enjoying my life there. Of course, you know, people have said to me then and now, there's some lovely beaches in Jersey. I said, I've fucking no idea. Unless a pub had a sunroof, there was no way that I was out. I was come back whiter than I did when I went. So that's part of my journey being there. So before we kick a ball, I need to say that there are references in this episode to domestic violence. And in order to fully tell my story, I have included some details that I remember vividly. Thank God this was my only encounter with domestic violence ever in my life. But in order to tell the story fully, I feel the details are important. So please think about that before you decide to continue to watch. If that's something that might be upsetting for you, then this might not be the episode for you. So for the rest of us that are still here, are you sitting comfortably? Then I'll begin. And without warning, a straight guy took a shine to me, showering me with compliments, asking me out, bringing me flowers. And he suggested, you know, maybe you are spending too much time on the gay scene because you're not gay, are you? I was like a smitten kitten. His name was Joe. He was tall, dark and handsome, and he came from London. And before long, much to my surprise, we started to go out as like a proper couple. I couldn't understand what he saw in me. All the girls fancied him, and yet here was I. I called myself a big fat lassie. And when I saw all the other girls that just were fawning and fetting over him, I thought, I don't know what it is about me, and could never understand it. And in those circumstances when you're living away from home, I think life moves at a slightly different pace. And within a few months, he says to me, you know, I'm going to have to give up my flat, Christine. The lease is up. What do you say if I move in with you? Oh, I was delighted. I was absolutely beyond thrilled to think this tall, dark, handsome man was going to move in with me. It made it more official. But it wasn't long before this perfect gentleman turned into an abusive, controlling monster. So to start with, he started to go out on his own. I'm meeting my pals, he said. So I would maybe go out with my friend Cathrine. You might remember her from the last series. She was this fantastic woman who had, you know, an incredible life of wealth and wonderful family and a huge big mansion on the outskirts of Jersey. And we had become friends. We had nothing in common, nothing at all. But somehow we became friends, and we did become closer friends. So, you know, she would say to me when he was going out, and sometimes he didn't come back, just come and stay with me, in her very posh voice. Come and stay with me. And I liked her parents, but they were the poshest people. You had to really focus on what they were saying. The way they spoke was so different from me. So often I would just go there. I would just go and stay. It was nice, you know. It was nice in the country, you know. And they were such a novelty for me. The story of their lives and their granny, and it was just brilliant. I loved it. So I'm trying to think how long it would be. Not that long into this guy moving in with me, I'd probably say I saw the real side of him. For me, without any proper explanation, there would be these absolute explosive outbursts that always, for me, came when I was least expecting them, shouting and screaming at me if, for example, I had cooked something and it wasn't done well, which was fair enough. I was a fucking terrible cook. You know, I had been brought up with a mother who was an incredible cook and baker. Why would I need to learn to cook? But to this guy, it was like unforgivable. And the outbursts were very vicious from the start. He called me for everything. He missed nothing out. I was fat. I was ugly. I was lazy, and no one would ever look at me. And I was so lucky to have him. So he just chipped away at my confidence bit by bit. And slowly I was turning into a nervous wreck, whether he was in the flat or not. Because even when he wasn't in the flat, I was in a nervous wreck waiting for him to come back. These outbursts became... where they went from, I would say, frequent to regular. They just kind of, they got worse. But I just could never understand why something like, the flat's not tidy. What the fuck have you been doing all day? Or, and I was working full time. It just, I could never understand what he was complaining about for me did not match this explosive behaviour. I'd never encountered anything like it before. So they just got worse. And honestly, I was absolutely frightened to death of him and frightened to leave him as well. But then the outbursts escalated from shouting to punching. Always my head. Oh, I don't know why, but always my head. I would be crying and screaming, and immediately he would be on his knees. He would stop, he would be on his knees, he would be telling me he loved me, he would be telling me this would never happen again. He had no idea what had got into him. He was a lucky man to have me, how sorry he was, and all that stuff. But it was just like Groundhog Day. Same thing, all the time, nothing changed. I didn't tell anybody this, but, you know, my boss was saying to me, and even Cathrine was saying, you okay? You seem so nervous. You're so uptight all the time. Because I wasn't sleeping as well, you know, it's just constantly worried. So the next time I managed to meet up with Cathrine and we weren't at work, I just completely broke down and I told her what had happened. And she said, you'll need to leave him. You can come and stay with us. You can come and stay with me and my family. But to be honest, I was too afraid. I was too afraid to leave him. I was afraid that if he found out that I had told anybody about his behaviour, he would just go mad and I would be the one that would end up being worse off. Cathrine was so kind for me. She was such a great friend, and it was great to get out of that flat at times, you know, and she still would take me under her wings. And she would always, you know, I didn't really speak about it much after that, but any time she got a chance to invite me out, and her parents were always so welcoming. But two situations happened in fairly quick succession that forced me to make a decision. Again, one evening, for absolutely no reason, Joe just burst into one of these violent verbal outbursts. And that escalated to me just being battered. These blows were coming down, not just on my head. He's a big, strong guy, you know, on my head, but my face as well. And so with the with the force of the blows, I would end up on the ground. And when I was on the ground, he was kicking me when I was on the ground. And so there was all this, he's screaming at me, I'm screaming in pain. It seemed at that moment to be relentless and go on forever. So very quickly, the neighbours were on the scene, chapping the door. Are you okay in there, Christine? But, you know, you could hardly hear them because Joe was still shouting all these obscenities at me. But then the neighbours mentioned the police. So when they mentioned the police, he stopped. He very calmly went, changed his clothes, and he left. He didn't say anything to me at all. So I think I was still in shock. I just couldn't believe what had happened. And then the police came to the door. So the police are asking the usual questions. They took one look at me and they said, you need to go to the hospital. You need to get checked over. I wouldn't go. And they said, who did this to you? All these usual questions. And I refused. And they said, this is a violent person. You'll need to press charges. I wouldn't give them his name. I wouldn't press charges. Why? I was terrified. As simple as that. But what I did do was I said, could you call my friend Cathrine? No mobiles in those days. Could you call my friend Cathrine and ask her if she could come and get me? So she did. Cathrine rocked up with her wee mini, packed a bag for me, and off we went to her house. Our mother had some medical experience, I think, from the war, and she checked me over. She says, I don't think anything's broken, but you really need to get your head checked. And so when I forced myself, if you like, I was terrified to look in the mirror to see what I was like. I just didn't know myself. I just burst into tears. It was just grotesque. It was just, and you know, it was swollen. I was bruised. There was no cuts. And it looked to me like my head was twice its normal size. It probably wasn't, but it felt like that. And anytime I moved it to the left or the right, it was so painful. So I just burst out crying. And I'm trying to say to myself, how could this happen? How could a man that says they love you do this to you? I couldn't understand it. So, as you might remember, Cathrine and I worked in the same shop, and she went into work the next day, spoke to our boss, who didn't really know my story but knew some of it, and said, look, Christine's almost like being attacked and she'll need to have some time off her. She's in a pretty bad way. And the boss said, of course, I'll give her 2 weeks holiday. So that was great. That allowed me to kind of relax a bit in this lovely environment, you know, this sanctuary out in the country, and nobody knew where I was. No mobiles in the 70s. So I just really felt that I could relax and I could start to focus on recovering. So again, you know, Catherine's mum offered to let me stay. She said, Christine, you can stay as long as you want. I just wish you would leave this man. You're so young. I mean, I was only 18. You know what? There's so much ahead for you. You don't need to put up with this. And I said to her, I'm frightened. She said, I know, but we'll be here. We'll help you. But still, I just couldn't. But as I say, I just couldn't process that anybody who said they loved you as much as he did could do something so terrible to someone they loved. So back in the town, Joe was constantly coming into the shop and, you know, asking Cathrine, how is she? Is she okay? Is she coming back to work? And da-da-da. But she made her feelings very clear toward him. She told him to fuck off. And she said to him, you know, you need to leave it alone. There is no chance of any reconciliation with Christine. She's in a terrible state and you should be absolutely ashamed of yourself for what you've done to her. But she did say to him, you need to move out. You need to move out and give, at least for a while, give her a chance to you know, get back in her own space. So after 2 weeks, you know, these 2 weeks holiday that I had, I was starting to feel better. The bruises on my body and my legs and things like that were all beginning to fade, but not so on my face. It wasn't as bad, but it certainly, you know, we worked in the beauty trade as such. It wasn't you know, how you look was a really important factor, and there was no way I could go back to work. So it seemed to me my only option was to go to the doctor, which I really didn't want to do. So I go to the doctor with this face, and he says, in the name of God, you know, what on earth has happened to you? I said, listen, I've been attacked, but I didn't want to give any information out at all. And he said, you need to go to the hospital, especially to get that head checked out. I said, I'm not going to the hospital. I just need 2 more weeks. I can't go back to my work, etc. And so he gave me a 2-week sick line. Because despite everything that happened with him, Joe, I really liked Jersey. It's a very small community in those days. And it's like, you know, more than 50 years ago. Well, about 50 years ago now. And it was a very small community, a huge gay community for such a small population. And it just was lovely. It was everybody that was working there was away from home. There was a lot of people from London, people from Scotland. And so you became more like a family very quickly. And I wasn't ready to leave. I had a good job, a good boss. Had a good friend as well in Cathrine, so I wanted to try and salvage something, and I didn't want it to end. I wasn't ready for that. So, but, you know, I'm still off work. Joe's still persistent, bringing in flowers now, asking to Cathrine, please give her those flowers, and she's just putting them in the bin. And again, she's reminding him, you need to move out. You need to get out of there. She's in a lot of trouble with all that trouble you caused with her landlord, blah, blah, blah. And surprise, surprise, he did. He did move out, and he gave her his key. Or as we thought, the only key. Still, he was asking, where is she? When's she coming back? And Cathrine just wasn't letting on. She just said, doesn't it matter to you? You just need to get yourself away from her and give her a chance. So Cathrine went down with my money, paid my rent, cleaned up the flat for me, didn't tell me what kind of state it was in, but she cleaned it up, and it was ready for me to return after my 2 weeks. What a pal. And then, you know, no one seemed to have seen this guy. You know, it was, as I say, a small community. There was one like main street, and, you know, everybody kind of knew each other, and everybody was kind of thinking maybe he'd actually gone back to London. And I had heard as well that he'd been sacked from his job for punching one of his colleagues. So I thought maybe that as well. And then when I did get back to work, a friend of Joe's, I met him in the street, and he said to me, you know, Christine, I think now is the time that I need to be honest with you. I used to work with this guy in London. He is bad news. You know, I can see the state. I've heard all about what happened to you, but, you know, I honestly think you've had a lucky escape. You need to steer clear from him. He's just out the jail. He was out the jail for some kind of assault and battery. I can't honestly remember, but something like that. He's not long out the jail when he came over to Jersey. He was wanting a fresh start. So all of that made me think that he had probably gone back to London. So I was back at my work. I was back in my flat, obviously anxious in the beginning. And so grateful, obviously, to Cathrine and her family for, God, I mean, you know, there I was, no family around me, and they just took care of me and put me under their wings. God knows what I would have done if they hadn't been there. So, of course, when I got into the flat, Joe left me a note. I love you, and please give another chance. All that stuff. Just put it straight in the bin and thought to myself, that'll be my last dealings with him. But I was wrong. So one night or early morning, I'm sleeping, and I get wakened up by this voice very close to me. Isn't it funny, after all these years, I can remember exactly what he said? Hello, it's me, Joe. I'm back, and I'm going to make a few changes, starting with your face. His voice was slow, deliberate, and very calm, very unnerving. The room was in total darkness. I had no idea. It took me a while, obviously, to get my bearings and what on earth was going on. And the smell of booze off him, you know, like old booze, was absolutely sickening. Then he put his hands round my throat, round my neck, and what I thought felt like a knife at my throat. I've never been so petrified in my whole life. That was the most petrified ever. Even to this day at 67, never have I been as frightened for my life as I was then. And I really felt sure that he was going to kill me. I felt by this point he was capable of anything. He was just like a psychopath. I was shitting myself. And I thought, well, this is it. I'm going to die. And I don't know how, but I started to speak to him. I suppose I was trying to plead for my life when I think about it now. He was having none of it. Absolutely none of it. He said to me, I used to watch you every morning, putting on all that makeup, getting ready for your work. You thought you were so pretty, but actually you are fat and ugly. But anyway, I'm going to be the one that's going to finish you, starting with this face of yours. And he started to move the knife from my throat up here to my cheek. I don't know what kicks in these situations, you know. Is it the flight or fight or whatever? I don't know, something like that. But I guess if you know that death could be very close for you, then maybe I don't know, maybe just pull out all the stops. But anyway, I must have known it was now or never. I started to say to him, you know, you're going to go back to jail. And you're going to go back to jail for a long time if you kill me. By that time, you'll have missed all the good years of your life. It'll be hard to... you'll have missed the boat, really. It'll be hard to claw back your life when you're an old man, when you've missed the best of it. You won't be able to start again. Was I really worth that? So I don't know if it was God or the universe that was watching over me at that dark moment, but somehow my words penetrated and he stopped. Took the knife away and he put it on the table and he burst into tears. He begged me to take him back. He said, I'll do anything. I can't live without you. If I can't have you, I will have to kill you. So I jumped out of bed, put on the light. What a sight he was. He looked as though he'd been living rough and certainly had been on a bender. He was absolutely stinking. So I'm trying to pull my thoughts together, think on my feet. And I said, okay, if it means that much, I will take you back. But you're going to have to give me a couple of days to get things sorted out with the landlord, because I get into absolute trouble the last time you created all that problems and the police were around here. So I need a couple of days to get this sorted out. And you need to go somewhere, get yourself squared up and get yourself a job. If you want us to start properly, you've got to do your part as well. So he was so grateful. He was apologising. He was greeting, all the things that he always did. And finally, I managed to get him to leave and say, look, give me at least one day and come back. Don't come to my work, come here at night. So as soon as he left, I was just shaking like a leaf. I packed up all my things. I'd been there for nearly 2 years at this point, and I packed up everything that I could pack up and to put into my suitcase. I phoned Cathrine and I told her that if I could get a flight, I was going back today. Went straight down to those days we had to go down to a travel agent, book a flight, managed to get a flight that evening. Cathrine was brilliant. She actually drove me to the airport. I paid my rent, spoke to my boss, and she said to me, look, she was so supportive and so kind. And she said to me, without question, they're doing the right thing, Christian. And I'm sorry that things have ended like this. And I'm sorry, that he has ruined your stay in Jersey. And, if things ever change, get back in touch. But as far as I was concerned, I was doing the only thing. I was doing the only thing I could to save my life and to get me away from this abusive guy. So before you know it, there's me back in Glasgow. So much for that new adventure, the next new adventure. My parents, not particularly happy to see me. They knew I was coming. I phoned them. They're a bit like, oh, kind of resigned themselves to it. But they let me stay with them anyway. And all that drama with Joe, never talked about until now. I don't think I've told anybody that story except you. 50 years ago. I was ready for the next adventure because my friend in Glasgow that I had been in touch with to tell him I was coming back said, listen, I think it's time for you to change your career. He was a hospitality graduate. He said, listen, I'm going up to work in a hotel up in Scotland. I'll get you an interview and I'll be there. So if you get the job, we can both work together. That'd be a laugh, wouldn't it? And I thought, I thought I was a bit of a glamour puss, you know, and I thought, hotel? Don't know how that work's going to fit in with me. Then he said, Christine, live-in accommodation. I said, I'm in. So up I go for the interview, get the job. What was it? A barmaid. Fucking Disneyland. My life is complete. For a woman like me who loved a bevy, a barmaid's job was, there could be nothing finer. Life could never get any better than that. And although, to be fair, in the last year I had lived in Jersey, I had cooled the jets, I wasn't really drinking, I was getting more involved with this guy and calming down a wee bit, you know. Now I was embarking on the new adventure, so back to the old me. So this was me with a new career change. So, but before that, I had these, maybe they were migraines, I don't know, but terrible headaches from maybe 3 to 4 months. Of course, I never told anybody, but I thought, now that I'm back, I feel that I need to kind of start the new adventure, getting rid of all the stuff for the old adventure. So I went to my doctor. He said, what happened to you? What happened to you anyway? Oh, I says, I got attacked when I was living in Jersey, which is more or less the truth, really, wasn't it? So he says, no, you'll need to go to the hospital with that. I don't have the equipment here in a doctor's surgery to look at that. You'll need to go to the hospital. So I says, all right. So there I go to the hospital, and the the guy does some X-rays. I get called back. You didn't need to wait that long in those days, you know, for an X-ray. You know, like now, where you're about fucking 5 years to wait for the result of your X-ray. So I get called back and he says to me, there's definite bruising in your head, definitely bruising there. He says, but I don't think there's anything permanent. I can't see anything that's permanent, but here's some painkillers. Take that. If you find it's not, you know, going away, come back. Aye, right. I was never coming back. So he says, that's as much as I can do for you. But honestly, you know, you need to really come back if these persist. There might be something else me to look at. So that was the end, the sweeping up, if you like, of the Jersey stuff. And now looking to move my career into this, working in a hotel, being a barmaid, which I thought was going to be the most wonderful, wonderful thing for me. Access to bevy all the time. Life could not be better. I was very excited. As I said already, there was live-in accommodation. I could get away from my parents. I was going to be working with one of my really good pals. What could be better? So that's the end of this episode. It was a wee bit grim, some of it, wasn't it? But, you know, I did escape. I did escape for another adventure. And next time I want to talk about that. I want to talk about my new adventure in the Highlands. And and how that progressed. Go over that part of my life. And actually, the next episode is going to be the last of series 1. So this will be the last of talking about my life from age 11 to 25. And the next series is going to be a continuation of that. So from 25 to 60. So lots more still to come if you're enjoying it. I hope you are. So thanks for joining me today. And I hope you appreciate that all these details of what happened to me are very important for me to get out. And I'm going to share something with you actually just before I sign off, which is this morning when I was doing a verbal practice. I know you won't believe it, but I do actually practice these. I actually was greeting. I was actually crying and sobbing, and I was like, oh, what is this? And I'm thinking about poor Cam, this fantastic guy that I work with on these projects. And I thought, oh my God, he's going to be editing like mad. And I was just saying to him, when I came in, I was telling Cam about it. And I said, it must be because although I've written everything about my life, the real difficult, dark times, I had never, ever spoken about out loud. So actually that time doing that practicing in my house out loud was the first time that I'd ever said these words to myself. So thank God I never broke down the day. Poor Cam, wouldn't be fair on him, and it wouldn't be fair on you. You wouldn't get the right story. So that must have been, me kind of facing it, I suppose, but it was quite... it's quite a few tissues get used this morning, and I thought, oh, fucking hell. But at least I got through this today, no problem at all. So as my mother would always say, it's better out than in, as they say. So again, thank you very much for joining me on this episode. I really look forward to seeing you next time, and take care. Thanks.